Hello and welcome to another edition, a post-Indy 500 edition of IndyCar Weekly. I'm the IndyStar Motorsports Insider Nathan Brown, joined as always by my co-host Stefan Wilson. We're here to chat about a really exciting Indy 500 run just a couple days ago and won yet again by Josef Newgarden. We'll get into the down to the wire battle between Josef and Pato O'Ward. We will discuss kind of how that sprint to the finish unfolded, strategy coming together between two separate groups to create a really awesome 4 or 5 car battle, the best of which we've seen at the 500 here in a couple years. Red flag free, importantly. We'll get into some other observations from the race, and then we'll throw it ahead and focus a little bit on the championship and the Detroit Grand Prix before we finish up here. But Stefan, again, thanks so much for joining me. You mentioned you were able to be back in Indianapolis IMS over the weekend, got to take in Carb Day, and was at the track even on Saturday, and then get home. You're rushing home, flying home to just be ready to watch the race, and then learn you got a few extra hours in front of you there, as we all did, of course.
Yeah, no, it was great to be back out at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Bittersweet. I don't like being there and not being in a car. I feel like a spare part. But it was great to see everyone. A lot of fans stopped me and said hi and really welcomed me back. So that was great, and appreciate all the support from them. And it was exciting race, exciting Carb Day. I can tell you, like, I've never seen so many fans of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway on the Saturday. I know I'm usually busy, so maybe I don't see it, but just walking around the speedway to various meetings, I just was blown away by just how many people were there on Legends Day, and it was really cool to see. At one point I was walking through the plaza, and I'm like, this is like Disneyland. There's just people everywhere. That people just enjoying being there at the speedway, and that's that is definitely a good sign for the Indianapolis 500.
Mm-hmm. A couple years ago, I remember I've typically gone to take in the public drivers meeting there that they have just before the drivers are whisked away to kick off the parade in downtown Indianapolis. But a couple of years ago, my wife joined me and kind of just like took in the whole thing. And what really amazed me were how many people turn out for that public driver's autograph session. Like you envision, I think for whatever reason in my head, I envision like being able to get multiple driver's autographs. You literally can only stand in one line, and the time it takes to get through said line is all the time you have. So you basically, and from what I've seen, pretty much have to like pick a single driver whose autograph you want, and that's what you're going to get. And sometimes if you don't even get there soon enough, the lines are too long because they only obviously have a specific amount of time that can last. It's really cool to see all those folks out there. I'm interested to get your perspective on Carb Day being there as not in a driver role. I'm sure you weren't enjoying it maybe as much as other people were enjoying it. The folks that got there at 5 or 6 a.m. and were drinking until 8 until the rain started falling at 7 or 8. What was that crowd that, like, it's for me, it's obviously not as big of a crowd, but it almost feels like a more boisterous crowd than the one that shows up on race day.
For sure. I being a Carb Day, so I've been to several Carb Days, and back when I lived in Indy, I would give pace car rides at various times, throughout the year at the Speedway, be called up, hey, can you come do this event? So I've been, at times had to do pace car rides on Brickyard 400 weekend, and you get to meet people that are really engaged in motorsports, and obviously they're there doing a pace car ride, and 9 times out of 10 I'd be like, hey, have you been to the 500? And they're like, no. And I'm like, what, you live in Indy and you haven't been to the 500? And they'll go, but I've been in Cobb Day. So it's like the NASCAR crowd really turns out for Cobb Day.
That's great.
They're just a boisterous crowd, like you said, and just there to have a good time, have a party, and it's just a good atmosphere. It was just a great atmosphere on Friday. I just want to go a little bit off topic here and say kudos to Don Gisick. I was there on Saturday, and his passion for the speedway, for the 500, for the fans, for the sport is really infectious. He was one of the only ones that was there and opened up the garage, and fans that were in the garage area, he was inviting them to come in and just take a brief peek into the garage area, to the garage of the John Ryan Bull Cusick Motorsports team. And I just think that's really cool. Every fan that came in, it was like they just gotten a tour of the garage is something that they'd long wanted to do, and it really made their day. And here's just an idea that could be used in the future. But I think it'd be cool to see teams really get behind that kind of idea, opening up the garages, maybe cordoning off the back section of the garage so fans can sort of walk through, make it kind of like an exhibit, that you walk through, get to see the night before or the day before the Indy 500, getting to see inside the Penske garage or the Ganassi garage or the DRR Cusick garage. That would be a neat way to sort of make Legends Day even more legendary.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know what all the restrictions are. What it's hard sometimes to keep track of, like what badge gets you in what area on what day, and when you can buy just like a single day pass to get in the garage or other places that the pits, things like that. But it's one thing that comes to mind when you mention that, and if this is already a rule or already allowed, then ignore it. But like, I wonder if there's a way where Legends Day could just be like anyone gets into the garages for free.
Yeah.
And so rather than having to have some sort of a pass, like that's almost kind of like a community day.
Absolutely,
in some way.
yeah.
Like a lot of races that we go to on the IndyCar calendar outside the 500, where Friday is free day and everyone can go everywhere. You don't have to pay anything. That would be a cool way to, if folks are not out at the parade, other fans that are wanting to stick around there, obviously you've still got some team personnel that could handle something like this, would be a cool way to just allow folks that maybe don't otherwise get chances to get up that close. Obviously, this is a very welcoming opening sport compared to some other areas of motorsports, but would just maybe be a really cool way to get some folks opportunities to see things closer than they might normally for no additional cost.
Absolutely. And I guess you could even make it like a certain time, like 2 to 4 p.m. where
Yeah.
that way, if you've got, if teams and drivers have important things to work on Saturday before the race, they can get that done early. Then they're not getting congested if it's, it's open and there's just a lot of foot traffic, it's hard to get around and move around. So, you could still have all the, professional side and the working side out of the way, and then let fans really get a chance to walk through the garages. And like I said, if you cordoned it off, so, you had stanchions that went from one door to the other door in the garage, you can just walk through and just see the back of it. I just think that'd be really cool, and a great way to let fans really engage in the sport.
Agreed. Well, let's get into this 500 that we saw Sunday evening. It felt almost little endurance race, like getting through that whole day. Man, it was something else. We were talking about this before we came on here. I mistakenly stayed up and watched the Pacers lose tragically their second of 3 close losses in this playoff series that we now know is over after last night. That game didn't get over until, I want to say, about 11:15, 11:30. So at that point, I was actually planning to wake up at about 1:30, 1:45 to get to the track. I still had some work I was needing to do, and just said, I'm going to get to the track and do it there. There's a perfect way to make sure I'm not still sleeping. Slept until 2:30 and got to the track right around 4. And I didn't leave there until probably 12:45 Monday morning. Got home, probably wasn't asleep until around 1:30. So it was about a 23-hour day. They're normally very long, but it was rearing and roaring from the
Extra long.
start. We had a press conference with Doug Bowles about rain at 6:20 in the morning. I think that's the earliest press conference I've ever attended. But it was great. I'm so happy and so thankful to all the folks at IMS, Penske Entertainment, NBC, everyone that helped get that race in on Sunday. It would not have been the same to have to come back and do it on Monday, either parts or all of it. And that was a really impressive feat. And it was then, I think, fitting that we got to see the finish, that we saw Josef Newgarden edges Pato Award by under 0.4 of a second, makes another backstretch last lap pass to win his second consecutive Indy 500, become one of, I think, 21 two-time or multi-time champions of this race, and does it back-to-back for the first time in the sport since Helio Castroneves did it in 2001 and 2002. For Pato Award, it's another just really tough, close, near win. And you could tell watching that broadcast just how gutting that was for him as a competitor who's come so close, who's learned so much over these last 2 years and the ways in which he's come short. I felt like digesting all of that was just two like opposite sides of emotions going on there, but between those two teams, how great and how gutting this race can leave you. And it was probably a perfect picture for what this race means for everyone.
Yeah, I think for Josef, it was just, a lot of tension that had been built up over the last few months with all the storylines that had occurred since St. Pete. And, you saw that just, he's been very quiet and reserved, like he's biding his time to see what he really thinks. And, getting the win, it was like he finally got to release that and say a lot without saying much, So, I think the finish, I think I predicted that I thought it was going to be Newgarden that would go on to win. And I've been Team Newgarden from the start of the month. He just looks so strong. And, with the experience he gained last year fighting for the win, I feel like he's set up now where he could go on and be, I think, the first to do it 3 times in a row. I'm going to say it because it seems like the Indy 500 runs through Josef Newgarden right now. The last 3 or 4 years, Penske struggled in qualifying. They've sorted that out. They've fixed that. They've gained some speed. And the speed that they showed in race trim, the way he could easily make that pass on Pato down the back straight to take the lead on the last lap after getting passed down the front stretch, it was just super impressive. And he just looks like he's so confident, so brave with a lot of moves he was making that, he's set up, until something really drastically changes with the format of the cars, with this package. It's hard to bet against Josef Newgarden at the Indy 500.
Hard to bet against him at really any ovals that we go to nowadays. Yeah. Now, of course, I think we all wish that there were another 1 or 2 on the schedule. Certainly, another 1 or 2 super speedways, or at least medium length, 1.5 miles or so tracks, and maybe we could do away with the double headers that we have at Iowa and Milwaukee now. But it is always very impressive just how strong Josef, not only how strong Josef is, but how seemingly no one, with some rare exceptions, how rarely it is that anyone seems like they can match him. And obviously Pato was there on that last lap, and I thought it was neat to have watched Pato's last 2 500s,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you could tell how ways in which he had learned from those
And
experiences
matured.
and matured and taken those lessons to
Yeah.
heart and applied them. You remember back to 2002 or 2022, where he said after the fact, when he had maybe an opportunity to try and hold it, I think it was on the inside, when Marcus Ericsson
Yep.
was going around the outside going in turn one. Pato basically backed out. Ericsson goes around. We soon have a crash, and Marcus is the winner under caution. Last year, Pato maybe a little bit too aggressive. He was sitting third, tried to make a pass for second, still with 8 laps to go. Depending on who you talk to, maybe he needed to make that move at that time because of just how hard it was to pass once you get to third on back, but still felt like maybe you didn't need to be so desperate at that point. And this year he, lap 196, 197, I think, maybe 97, 98, had some chances where he could have passed Josef, chose not to, felt like he made the proper move at the proper time. And obviously it wasn't enough. And I don't know that it ever was going to be enough, because I think if he passes Josef any earlier, Joseph's still going to pass him back, just has more opportunities to do so. And I don't know if he felt like he was going to be comfortable enough with the way the wind was blowing and different intricacies about the track to be able to make that pass going into 3 like Josef did back on him. And there's also the freak possibility that if you wait another half a lap, that there could be crash behind you, and then you literally waited too long to try and make an attempt, and you didn't really get a shot to try and win the race. And so he had a shot, he took it. Ultimately, it doesn't work out for him. I know this will probably be tough for him to digest for a little while. I don't know how many more of these you have to weather before you start to feel like, you start to question, am I ever going to win this? I don't know when that sets in, where you're kind of in that like Tony Kanaan mode of the mid to late 2000s, early aughts, where folks, where he was a fan favorite around IMS, but hadn't won this race and kind of didn't know if he was ever going to. But I hope he can mentally take this in stride and come back even stronger than he was this year.
His average finish at Indy is just super impressive. That has to have jumped right up there. I know last year's finish didn't really help that average, but I have to assume it's back up there pretty strong now. It's easy to question, like, did Pato go too soon? I said this on Twitter, but if you've got a chance to take the lead on the final lap of the Indy 500 and you don't take the lead, there's no guarantees you'll ever get that chance again. And I think it would have been more haunting for him if he'd waited going into 1 and a yellow comes out coming down the backstretch, or, it just looked like Josef had the speed just to complete that pass in time going into turn 3. I'm not sure that Pato had the same kind of speed where he could have made that pass on Josef going into 3. Even if he'd got a good run through 2, all it takes is you get a little bit more understeer in the wake of Josef, and you have to lift out of it or crack the throttle, and there you go. You've missed out on taking the lead. So, like I said, it's easy with a crystal ball to say, oh yeah, you should have waited. I got several people saying that on Twitter, but I think he made the best decision in that moment, and it just wasn't enough. And it's simple as that. Like Newgarden had the speed. I mean, at the end of the day, he qualified 0.8 miles an hour faster than any other car out there, apart from his 2 teammates. So he had that speed advantage. I think they'd been trimmed. They trimmed at one point during the race late on, so he was set himself up for the finish, and he just had the speed. You saw, when he got passed into 1, he dropped back, and I thought, there's no way. He comes through turn 2, Pato has a gap, and I'm like, there's no way. There's no way that Newgarden's going to close that. The only way for Newgarden is going to be to get a good run through 4 and beat him to the line. and it's like the last third of the straight. Usually, when you're already realizing I'm this is too late. I'm not going to be able to make the pass. Newgarden's car just accelerated. I'd love to know if Pato maybe was in the limiter or was Josef just that fast, because the way that as soon as he popped out on Pato, it just looked like the momentum suddenly shifted, and Newgarden just closed a lot of ground very quickly in a very short space to take the lead going into free. I was mind blown, and then it flashed back to last year with what happened with him, Pato and Marcus, and I thought, we already know that Pato said he's going to keep his foot in there, and Josef was really smart. He just turned in so gradual that he was able to keep the momentum up, keep continuing to get the overlap without sort of closing the door and creating the contact. So that was a smart move. Gave just enough room without getting in the marbles. He could complete the pass, and then he's off to the races. That was it. And it was cool to see that eruption of emotion out of Josef. I think there's, like I said, he was just blowing off a lot of steam that has built over the last 2 months. And I argue, I said this before off air, but I think as Pato drove an incredible race and was once again sort of showcased his fast hands. That save in the middle of the race is just bonkers. I mean, absolutely incredible. That could have been a race ender easily, and he fought his way to the front, aggressive racing. But I think that it was the wrong Garrett McLaren car that was fighting for the win, unfortunately. I think Rossi looked to be the stronger of the two in terms of raw speed. And as you heard Rossi say, it's just once you drop back into that P3, P4 position, you're kind of just sat in line. You don't have it kind of gets stagnant back there, and you don't have the ability to make up that position. So once we got down to 10 laps to go and everyone was running flat out, it was a 2-horse race from that point on. And unfortunately, I think for McLaren, it was the wrong car that was in P2 at the time, because I think that Rossi had maybe a little bit more speed in his car, started a little higher, was probably a little bit more trimmed down, and just all day looked like he was the faster McLaren. And it would have been interesting to see if it was Rossi in that position, if he'd been able to hold off going down into turn 3 in the lead. So that's not taking anything away from Pato. It's just it's just about outright speed, and I feel like Rossi had just a little bit more than Pato, and it just kind of happened where unfortunately Rossi pitted maybe a little too early on that last stop. I don't know if he was forced to stop at that point with fuel, but that made it a little more of a stretch. So he had to save fuel and couldn't be aggressive. And that's what allowed Pato to leapfrog him. And then that was it. That was all she wrote for him,
A couple quick, very novice thoughts from a track driver perspective. And be interested to get your take on these. I can't remember the driver or a couple drivers, but a couple mentioned some interesting thoughts about how and why Josef was able to make that move on the red carpet when I was attending the victory celebration last night. Mm-hmm. And the first thing someone mentioned was the wind direction. There was a headwind on the front stretch. And so for Pato, it's easier to make that move. Typically there on the front stretch, when you're the trailing car, you have the draft. The leading car is dealing with more, losing just a little bit more speed because of the wind direction. And when I was asking folks about, it seemed like it certainly wasn't just this last lap pass, but seemed like we saw a lot more 2 wide moves through the corners, where compared to other years, where it seems like so often if you truly do go 2 wide through the whole thing, that never works out okay at IMS. And someone mentioned that because we had so many early caution laps, that where folks were maybe running a little bit different lines, not running, just hugging the white line like you might during green flag running, that might have I don't know, rubbered things up a little bit higher, or just kind of worked in a groove where maybe guys felt a little bit more comfortable running higher than you might normally, and why Josef was going to go for it regardless. I don't think we have any question about that, but whether that move would have stuck or not. But the fact that it did stick as easily as it did, not to take anything away from Josef, but that some folks were saying part of that might have just been because the groove was a little bit wider this year, and that had something to do with just how many darn cautions we had. It was I think I counted 8, if I remember correctly, 10 cars that didn't make the finish for one reason or another. Does that make some sense to you from watching so far?
I'd honestly not thought about that. I think if you watch Josef's line, it was very, very calculated, very smart. Like I said, it was a very slow turn in that situation. You just slow your hands down. So you're just making a very, a wider arc on the way in. So it's not like he was out in the gray. The scary part is when you go in and you're truly side by side and it pushes you up the track, right where those marbles usually are, whereas he wasn't in the gray. He sort of carved in at a more gradual line. So what that did is allow him to continue to be moving past Pato. So it gave him some extra distance before they would normally intersect. So it was just a really, and I saw Josef actually do that same move last year. I think it was in the closing laps, like 30 laps to go, and he did that same exact move where it's just a very slow turn in. It allows you to get that extra distance to get the overlap you need to then be able to come down in front of him. So it was great racing. So I'm not sure. I think the colder conditions may have helped the situation a little bit too, and just the fact that there were so many cars out at that point, so there was less marbles being built up. Maybe it was the harder compound tires as well. Maybe they weren't producing as much marbles as they were in previous years. There's several possibilities, but I'm not sure that it's not like he was side by side in the corner. So I wasn't as worried as I remember 2011 when JR had to go around Charlie, and he was side by side in the middle of the corner, and you saw him pick up the marbles and off he went to the wall. So. Like I said, just really heads up driving by Josef to make that move stick. And there's something to be said for, he got to experience doing that last year, and it paid off. He knew exactly what he was going to do.
I would have really loved, as you mentioned, to see a Rossi Josef battle there too. Not that I didn't enjoy Pato. I don't want folks to get the wrong opinion there. But the reason I say that is over the last 4 or 5 years where Rossi's from a championship contention standpoint, at least his in-season performance has taken a little bit of a dip for a variety of reasons, certainly not just on his shoulders, but I think of him as a very intellectual driver, and I think Josef is very similar to that. Not that Pato isn't thinking or isn't incredibly smart and intuitive in the car, but I think he and Rossi are different drivers in that sense. And I would have been interested to see how Alexander would have approached that, where, when he notices Joseph's passing him, like, does Rossi, run just a hair wider than the very, very bottom lane just to make it so that Josef is up the track? I mean, just has to be up the track, or force Josef to really like throw it in there, a la Takuma Sato 2012, Dario Franchitti turn 1. That I don't know. I just would have been interested to see how those two guys would battle, because we've seen so much Pato Josef. I think there was a stat around that this was like their 8th 1-2 finish. Pato's only been in the series. Pato's only been in the series for this is his 5th full-time season now, so a good amount of down to the wire battles between those two guys, and we just haven't had a lot of that between Rossi and Josef lately since that 2019 championship battle between the two of them. So that was just kind of my only thought on that. I do think, as you said, I think Rossi had a little bit faster car. I think would have to talk to him or the team more to know kind of what happened from a fuel strategy standpoint, if he had to make that pit stop when he did, if they were just really trying to make sure that they didn't get caught out by a yellow, and went when they did. I mean, there's all sorts of things that could factor into it. If they wanted to feel like they were on the offensive instead of forced to make moves whenever other guys did, shadowing them, I don't entirely know, but it was still a fun one regardless. You and I were talking off pod about how great this finish was to watch. I admit that I was over those final 10-15 laps really nervous that we were going to have a crash, in part because we had so many this race, and then all of a sudden the final, whatever it was, 80 laps or so, or maybe it was 55, 60 laps or so, we didn't have any. And so it felt almost abnormal in a way because of the way the first 2/3 of the race had flowed. And we had such a good battle between Josef and Rossi and Dixon and Pato there that you just really hoped that didn't get gummied up by a red flag and having a restart, because it was a great, exciting finish without bunching up the field and then just seeing who's going to be in the lead when cars 17, 18, and 19 crash into each other at the yard of bricks on a restart. I'm glad we didn't have to do that, and I'm glad we didn't have to talk about any red flag, should they or shouldn't they have restarted the race discourse like I was having to write and talk about last year at this time. So
yeah, I 100% agree. It was nice just to get a clean battle, and I think from a non-IndyCar fan's perspective, if they were just tuning in and just seeing this for the first time, it would have been really bad to have stopped the race. I for one, just hate the red flags in general. I think it just takes away the integrity of the race, and it just kind of spoils the rhythm. You've got such an exciting race going on. If there's a yellow, then that's just tough. Like, I've seen it happen a million times, and I've never felt coming away when a race is rendered under yellow like, oh, that was ruined. That's my perspective. It's a 500-mile race, and that's just how it is. So, I feel like from a non-IndyCar fan, if you were tuning in, you got to witness some just incredible racing, especially after, if you're an F1 fan too, coming from watching Drive to Survive, that Monaco Grand Prix was just the absolute most boring race I think I've ever seen in my life. I turned it off. It was already set, so in contrast, the Indy 500 delivered, and it was I was on the edge of my seat, waiting to see who was gonna win this chess match between two absolute chess masters.
Boy, is it a shame that we don't have an oval race for like 2 months.
Yeah.
I was not around, even following the sport in the days when Milwaukee was the first race immediately after. I know there was a time there when Texas was the race immediately after, and then Detroit got into the fold. We all understand now, certainly, of course, since November 4th, 2019, why that is. It was even the case before then. But I always think back to folks that cover NASCAR nowadays talk about how great it is, at least this year especially, where you have the Daytona 500, and immediately after, folks who enjoyed that race now get to watch, with the new schedule format that they have now, get to go watch Atlanta, and that being a very similar race. And folks that are maybe that Daytona 500 was their first NASCAR race ever that they tuned into, and having the opportunity to find a connection in what you're watching the second time after you watch something the first time and enjoyed it enough to want to tune in. And again, not to say that IndyCar street racing is not exciting, is not enjoyable, is not a good product. It is and can be all of those things, but the event that you're going to watch on TV this coming Sunday at Detroit is such a different product than what you watched on Sunday. And to be frank, there's nothing that is like a last lap finish at the Indy 500, or even the last 10 laps of the Indy 500 when you have green flags all the way through and you have four of the greatest drivers in this sport over the last couple decades competing for the win. But man, we're going to see, we had a TV rating already come out. It was nearly 5.4 million, which is incredible. They had almost 300,000 people streaming it via Peacock and NBC Sports. That number could potentially go higher. Those were just the very rough initial figures that NBC came out with yesterday. They don't typically do that unless those numbers are very good. I wasn't expecting a TV number until Wednesday.
Was it a 6.5 over the last hour, I believe? 6.5 million in the last hour.
Right? I don't know if it was over the last hour. I do know that's where it peaked.
Okay.
And it peaked, they typically say they do that by 15-minute increments, basically. So the way they phrased it in the release was, and again, it could have been that or nearly that for other parts of the race, but it was basically those last 15 minutes of Pato and Joseph's battle. Yeah, peaked at 6.46 million, I think, and that's an awesome number. That is also, if memory serves me right, like what the average was back in like 2015, 16, which is sad. Hope it can get back there, but it's great. It's progress from the last couple of years.
At the same time, I feel like every sports TV rating has gone down in the last sort of, since 2015, just
you throw out the NFL.
Yeah.
There are some that are growing, and a lot of those are like your niche sports, like women's college basketball, the WNBA, Major League Soccer. There's some other ones that are consistently growing, but yes, you're right. A lot of, like the NBA, for example, Major League Baseball, mainstream sports outside of the NFL are definitely having tough times, I think, for the most part, in keeping up with where they were from a TV rating standpoint 10 years ago.
Yeah. So no, that's really encouraging signs. Like I said, if you were a first-time viewer and that was the race you got to, make your first time watching IndyCar, I don't know how you can't be hooked on that, because like, I'm a driver that's sitting at home on the couch wishing he was in the race, and I'm still on the edge of my seat, just entertained to the max. It was just a great race, and like I said, I think we got to witness two really, really good oval veterans battle it out, and that's all you can really ask for.
Mm-hmm. Let's go through. I'll ask you for one or two other moments from the race that sticks out. We don't need to run through the whole run of 33 results. I'll let you think on it for a second, and I'll give you mine. I know there are times that we see incidents on lap one, but man, you really felt for the three guys two guys that got caught up in Tom Blomqvist's move. Tom, watching the victory celebration last night, as you would expect from a great, respectable, experienced driver like himself, felt absolutely terrible that he got too low, got loose, spun, and ultimately cost Marcus Ericsson and kind of secondarily Pietro Fittipaldi their races. Pietro, not totally around them, got into the side of Callum Ilott, trying to basically perform an evasive maneuver to avoid the carnage of Tom and Marcus. But man, you just hate to see a race start like that, especially for someone like Marcus, who I was really interested to see how far up in this field he could get from 32nd. We saw Graham Rahal go from 33rd to 15th or 16th. We saw Connor Daly go from 29th to 10th. I don't think there's any reason to think Marcus Ericsson wouldn't have been able to maybe find himself in that top 10 100%. And I think that team, given what they have dealt with from some, multiple instances, faults of Marcus's, but also just the team as well that I know is stuck together with him through all of this, would have been a really great stamp of approval for that team and what they are building there with a new driver to be able to do that. And so I was just gutted for Marcus to not be able to go and experience that. It was ironic. We were probably only like 75 laps into the race, and he liked one of my tweets. And when you see a driver that should be in this race on Twitter 75 laps in the Indy 500, for whatever reason, just kind of put into perspective how a very different his afternoon had gone to compared to what he
you
was.
could just see it on Marcus's face. I mean, he just could not believe it. You wait around all day, you wait around all year to get into this race. You have to go through what he's been through this month, and then you get taken out on the first lap of the first corner. It's just absolutely heartbreaking for him and for the rest of the team. And for Tom, man, that was a bad move. Just to get caught out and just get too low to hit that curb when he did. I'm just really surprised. I don't know if he just got caught up in the moment, waiting around all day, and just bit of panic maybe going into one. But really unusual mistake to drop down onto that curb. We all know what happens there. I've touched the curb a couple of times myself, and it's not a good experience usually. So I've lived to tell the tale. But to see that happen to someone that's so experienced like him, very unusual. And the caveat of that is that the Maya Shank and Andretti relationship, that takes out essentially one of his teammates at the same time. So gotta feel like there's pressure starting to build there in that situation, unfortunately. For Pietro, I felt really bad for Pietro, honestly. That was totally out of his control. And unfortunately, I'm disappointed with Callum, to be honest, because he was obviously had the issue, with his car not shifting. They fixed that. He gets out there, and it was like he was in Days of Thunder, trying to shoot the gap, coming in there with a huge head of steam. And I'm like, you can see the cars wrecking ahead of you, and you see the smoke. You just back it down. But I don't know if he did, and it just didn't slow down. It was hard that the angle just kind of switched to him at the very last second.
Mm-hmm.
But I watched it and went, dude, that's not cool. That could have been way worse. You don't want to be when cars are wrecking like that. You've got to get the speed off, because the risks and dangers involved with hitting a car that's spun is too high. So for him to then take Pietro out, and then there was no consequences from race control, makes me really wonder what's going on there. We need to really be setting a precedent that, hey, when a yellow comes out, you've got to respect that on an oval, more so than a road course, but even on a road course, But so I was disappointed with that. Felt like we got a huge sponsor on Pietro's car, 5-Hour Energy.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big win for the team, for the series, to have that level of sponsor involved, and they're on lap one, and not really through Pietro's fault. So yeah, that was a shame.
It was another moment, I think, too, in this race. Colton Herta, one of several drivers, just
So you're
losing
stealing my moments, by the way. I got moments, and you've taken them, so I don't know what moments I'm going to recall.
That's all right. We can just talk through these. I think that works just as well. Colton Herta catches himself out from second place on lap 86.
Man.
And that was unique enough. And the way in which he nearly entirely kept it off the wall. And then I haven't talked to Colton about it, but just seemingly instinctively hops out of the car. I know the broadcast was making a big thing of it. I'll leave it to you to give your take on this. I don't know how.
Done that.
I was going to say, I don't know how instinctive it is to just unbuckle yourself when you come to a halt. I don't know, from your perspective, do you think he should have kept his foot in it and tried to keep driving it? Should he have asked them to tow him back to his pit box rather than getting out of? I don't know.
Yeah.
what your thought is from seeing the damage that he had there that was really relatively minimal, basically just busting the right front wing there.
Yeah, no. So really, first of all, like it was such a shame to see that happen because I think Colton had a really strong race car.
Yeah,
Again,
as he proved, he was up front, up in second from 13th starting up there.
he was making moves, looking really, really racy. As I said, I before the like last week, I'm not sure that he had the outright speed because he started back in 14th, had to carry more downforce, as we saw in the closing laps. Outright speed in the first two was everything. So, still not sure that he would have been able to overcome that speed of Newgarden. But still, it would have been exciting to see him down the stretch and see what he could do. And really just an unusual crash. Like it was so bizarre, like looked pretty comfortable on the way in, and all of a sudden the rear just swapped hands on him. So, I don't know if he was just on a very razor fine line, razor edge with the setup, and maybe got up too aggressive with the tools trying to make it turn, and that just wore out the right rear and caused that. I'd love to have more insight from him on like what he was feeling. Did he know he was loose before that? Like I assume he did. And was just like trying to ride it out. I know with this package, this car, you have to run it pretty loose to get it to turn in dirty air. So I'm just wondering, was that a lead up to that? Was that part of the cause? Just being too aggressive with the tools and the setup. But yeah, unusual crash, and then we see it. He miraculously, keeps it off the wall. Did a fantastic job almost keeps it off the wall, I should say, but all four corners were still intact. And the way it slapped the wall with the left front side of the wing, I think he must have felt like it, the actual wheel got into the wall too. And there's no doubt about it. At that point, you think you're done, like there's just no way that you think that you hit the wall. And even on the in-car, the noise sounded pretty crunchy, So it's like in car, you're and you're trying to save it, and there's so much going on. I'm sure he must have felt like he hit the wall much harder and really got some serious damage. Part of that's on the spotter. He's standing right there in one. Should have been able to see and stay in the car. The whole team. Maybe they did, and he just already had started unbuckling, right? So and taken the radio out. But you got a pretty good sight there from the spotter stand. It would have been nice. It would have been cool to see him stay in the car, either get towed back or just refired. Maybe stay within a lap of the leaders and then get a wave around, get back into it. That would have been just cool to see. Very Renus VK-ish. Yeah, no, I've been there. Back in 2013, I had my one and only street course race in IndyCar and got marbles and tagged the wall in the Baltimore Grand Prix. And, it hit the wall. You feel like normally that's day done. And I got out of the car, unbuckled, was walking to the safety vehicle, and looked back and saw that all four corners were still seemingly straight. And I got back in and drove back to pit lane and got back in the race. I don't know if you're allowed to do that now, but
I feel like the what's the phrase? Crap. Anyways, I think timings on that. I don't think race control in J Fry are going to be knocking on your door, giving you a time penalty for that. So you're probably okay.
Yeah. So it's passed, but yeah, no, it's it's a shame to see his race end like that. I think he was the strongest in Andretti car, and for how much stronger Andretti seemed this year than last year, unfortunately, their day was pretty rough. Apart from Kirkwood was probably the shining moment. Was he P6 or P5?
I think he was. I think it was 7. Actually, I think I have the results right here. Kyle Kirkwood 7th. Yes, Pato 2nd. Dixon third, Rossi fourth, Pillow fifth, McLaughlin sixth, Kyle Kirkwood in seventh.
Part of that is just the difference this year between Chevy and Honda. Honda looked like they took a step back in performance, and they looked like they took a step back in reliability too. Before you steal this moment of the race is the unfortunately the demise of a couple of Hondas in the field early in the race with just seemingly engine issues. We had a couple of Hondas there, and notably Felix Rosenqvist was the one that was a contender, and his engine expired.
What is when you're someone like Felix? I'm sure it's one thing to either crash out or be crashed out of this race. When you are humming along with no issues and all of a sudden your engine blows up, whatever it was, 30, 40 laps into this race, can you imagine, what can you tell me as best as you can without having been in the car, what Felix is going through in that situation, and then in the 24 to 36 hours since?
Fortunately, if I was in his position, you're glad that it didn't happen later in the race, and you go through all that and you get in a strong position, and you're maybe it would have hurt more if it had come later, put it that way. In my mind,
Fernando Alonso.
Exactly. If you're in a contention to win it and it goes, then it's just pure heartbreak. But early in the race, you don't really know how the rest of the race is going to go. Still heartbreaking, but it's less so. You're not sitting 24 hours later going, what could have been? And I'm not sure he really had a car that was going to battle those top three or topple those top three. Maybe not even the top five. So he's done a good job this month. So in a way, you're kind of coming out of it going, well, at least it wasn't me. At least I didn't crash. I'm not responsible. My team's still happy with the job I did. I get to come back and fight another day and come back next year and hopefully be stronger as a team, stronger as a driver, and stronger as a combined package. So there is a little tiny bit of relief that it wasn't a direct result of a mistake that you made or a cause of something that you did in the car. So like I said, had that happened 10 laps from the end and you've been battling it out in the top three, then that's when it's truly heartbreaking, and that's going to take a while to get over. But I think Felix is now head down, thinking it was a pretty solid month regardless. I showed well, and excited to probably come back here next year. It seems like the Andretti organization and the Shank organization is just on a rise. And, if the Chevy Honda battle is a little closer next year, then he's going to, that whole Andretti camp is going to be ones to watch for sure. So I'm sure Felix is already now focused on Detroit.
Absolutely. Before we finish up, I know we can't talk about this 500 without mentioning Kyle Larson and the impact he had on the interest of this race and the intrigue of this race, on the intrigue of the hours after this race as he's trying to get to Charlotte for a race that he didn't get to partake in for a reason which I still don't entirely understand. I know he comes away with a really devastating pit lane speeding penalty in what was essentially his first ever green flag pit stop in an IndyCar. And that ultimately derails his race from what very well could have been a top 5, top 6 finish. When you think of the guys in there, maybe it's tough to contend with guys like Alex Palou and Scott Dixon down the stretch. Maybe he's 7th or 8th, but still, I'm sure would feel a lot better than 18th and feeling like the drive-through penalty that you got for something that seems so innocuous afterwards, just not getting your foot on the brake soon enough and not hitting the pedal right, making sure your tires don't get locked up and going in a couple miles an hour too hot. I know how gutted he is. what was your just kind of your perspective of watching Kyle's whole month, the work he was doing up at the front of the race when he was there, and ultimately his impact as an Indy 500 rookie?
Yeah, first of all, I'm just shocked. We've gone 50 minutes
I
and
know.
not talked about Kyle Larson.
Maybe that's
So
something on us that we should have
yeah,
done differently,
no.
probably. But
There's the IndyCar diehards loving us right now, but there's probably
yeah,
a lot of Kyle Larson fans going, talk about Kyle. So we're going to talk about Kyle. He did a phenomenal job all month, and kind of what do you expect? You've got an absolute superstar of a driver who is as close to the days gone by drivers like Mario Andretti and AJ Foyt as you can get, that just jumps in anything, can contend. And you take that kind of level of driver, you put him in some really quality machinery like Aaron McLaren, he's going to contend, and he did just that. He looked strong all day. Obviously took, I think all month, it's been a steady learning curve for him. It's been with the rain and everything like that going on to contend with. That learning curve has been very progressive. And then you throw him into a 500-mile race with all these drivers that were seemingly insane for the first half of the race. Just a lot of crazy restarts. I'm sure he's never experienced I'm sure he experienced a lot of things and a lot of crazy restarts in other formulas, but watching the restarts from the couch on Sunday, I'm like, wow, this is next level compared to the previous years. I think it just shows you with this package how important track position is and how much drivers are willing to risk it on a restart. So it took, like I said, that learning curve just took a huge spike in the race, and he was handling that and adjusting and learning as the race went on. So that first restart was not too shiny, had the wheel spin, then upshifted way too soon, and then got swallowed up by I think 10 cars going into one. And then all of a sudden fixes that. It takes mistakes to learn, to highlight the areas you need to improve on. And like I said, he comes away just a much more experienced IndyCar driver after his 500-mile race. And like I said, the pit lane speed, that's just another element of this race that you have to perfect. And you watch guys like Dixon and you see their split times from carb day and the Monday practice, and the way he's finding tenths of a second on the brakes coming in the pit lane. It's tricky to with the limited amount of times you get to pit off of turn 4 to correct that. I've experienced that myself. In 2021 we had the brake issue where essentially the front brakes failed and caught me out. And I don't know. Gavin Ward alluded to some kind of brake issue with Kyle.
Kyle did too, and I still actually have audio from the victory celebration. I need to look back, listen back on. A good
could be very similar to it could be very similar to what I experienced in 2021 to a lesser extent. You run for such a long time, those masks or the brake pads just vibrate and they move away from the brake pedals. So that's something he maybe not have been used to, having to pump the brakes down the backstretch. And maybe that was the issue. But sorry, I cut you off there.
No, you're all good. I just was saying, go to IndyStar.com, and I'll have a story about that tomorrow. But I need to listen back to what Kyle said at the victory celebration last night to really kind of dissect that. The thing I took away, and this was unfortunate, and you could really tell. I mean, you could read it in Kyle's words that he posted on social media. What was that, Monday morning? But then seeing him at the victory celebration last night. He's really gutted. I'd not interacted with Kyle at all before this month, or at least before they announced that this double was happening. And he was at IMS a handful of times before then, but he was really, I don't think heartbroken is the right word. I think he was more like devastated. I think that's the best word to use. He felt so bad. Not that he did. I think there are two ways in which he's devastated. I think one of them is devastated that the day played out like it did for folks like Rick Hendrick, for Jeff Gordon, and other folks in that organization that put all of this together to make it possible so that he as a driver could try and do something like this. This was not just all about Kyle. It was about Jeff. It was about Rick, but they were doing something together. And I think he, as the man out front in all of this, just felt really bad that they didn't get to have the day that they were wanting to have. And I think there would then have been some solace if he didn't feel like the only real mistake in the race, consequential one, the one on the restart where he misses a gear upshifting. He obviously recovered from that because he was running again in the top 5 when he gets the pit lane speeding penalty. And the fact that he finished 18th instead of what might have been a top 6 finish. I mean, who knows? Maybe he's somehow really in the battle down the stretch, or at least the periphery of it, where like would have been so cool to have Kyle Larson basically make, as part of a 5-car battle over the final 10 laps. Maybe he's still back there with Rossi and Dixon and not able to hang with Pato and Joseph. I would tend to think that's probably the case, just because I don't know how fast of a car.
I think he ultimately would have finished 5th. I agree. Predicting and just seeing how it played out. I think that it's hard. It would have been. He already looked like he was behind Rossi. Dixon looked like he was on a mission. He would have been 4th or 5th, I feel like, which would have been a really solid day. And the amount, again, going through that experience of battling in the top 5 in the final few laps would have paid dividends coming back here. So I think that's sort of some of the things that he missed out on because of the mistake and because of the penalty.
Yeah, and then to make the effort to fly all the way to Charlotte, to land, to get off the helicopter, have his new fire suit on, his number 5 HMS Cup fire suit on, to be in a golf cart, heading to the pits to get there to the track a few minutes before it starts raining again, and then to wait that rainstorm out, and NASCAR and SMI folks are drying the track, and ultimately, because they were 249 laps in, I think, of the 400 laps they were going to run, they just decide it's too late and we're just going to call it. I know he wouldn't have gotten points. I know he wouldn't have gotten the experience of starting both races and the chaos of succeeding in putting all of the pieces together on the travel schedule to get there, from 500 checkered flag to Charlotte green flag. But I still think it would have been really special for him to feel like he, with the hand that he was dealt, did the best and still was able to complete as much as possible. I can't imagine he has any massive regrets because ultimately the weather was out of your hand and you have to choose one of those things. And I can't imagine anyone in that camp chooses anything other than, we're going to do the 500 and we're going to do as many laps as the Coke 600 as possible. And there's been conflicting things coming out of Charlotte since that. It was super humid and the track still wasn't drying as quickly as they wanted it to or needed it to. And they just didn't know when it was going to be ready. And it was already 12:30 or whatever time it was
when
they called it. It is. And then I've heard the arguments of folks that, this is Cup's, one of Cup's crown jewel races, and you can't just call it. I think someone was saying, they were running the Daytona 500 at 3 a.m. A few years back, and that why didn't you just go another 30 minutes and see what happened? I don't know. I'm not going to get into that discourse, but it was just, long story short, just you could tell how painful that whole 24-hour period was for Kyle, in the way in which they had planned and prepared so much for all of those pieces.
The expenses to do what they did, just to run 2 races is pretty phenomenal.
And then for literally one of the few things that could have been out of their hands to kind of take that away. Is just
so where's your head at today? I've read some comments from Kyle, but they're out of context a little, so I don't know how much to read into it. But it seems like Kyle is coming out of this race and he's disappointed, obviously, with the weather impact, and it seems like he's refocusing on NASCAR, and he's sort of rearing that he's missed out on doing a NASCAR race. Are you thinking that this experience kind of deters him from running the double again next year? Or are you thinking that he's refocused, or he's rearing the mistake and he's going to come back and try and fix the mistake that he made in the 500? You spoke to him on the red carpet. I'm just kind of seeing what's your kind of gut feeling and take on that.
I think there's two parts of that answer. One, like literally word for word, Kyle said he did not enjoy Sunday.
That is so strange. Like
and
I don't know how you go for the Indy 500 and don't enjoy it. Like even with the impact that it had, it's just like
I think I don't know. And again, I don't know Kyle super well. I just think I don't know if it's the way in which this was all built up publicly and privately and all the things that went into it. And then it wasn't the things that they had put into it that went wrong. It was just the uncontrollables. I don't know if that's something about Kyle's personality. Certainly 24 hours later, he wasn't able to see the high points of it. At the same time, though, I do certainly think he will be back. I know Jenna Fryer of the Associated Press has previously reported a while back that this is a 2-year deal. Many of us have asked Rick and asked Zach Brown, McLaren Racing CEO, about that. And they have, Zach said even on a call a week ago when we actually had both Rick and Zach on a Zoom, the question was posed, are you guys going to do this again? Zach said, you already know my answer. So it's very clear Air McLaren wants to do this again. I guess as long as maybe some of it depends on what Rick Hendrick has to go through in order to get the waiver for NASCAR. The long story short on that, for folks that don't follow NASCAR, their playoff format is such that you get in if you win a race, and then to fill out the rest of those spots, they do it on points. But Kyle's already won 2 races this year, so he is automatically in the playoffs. But in order to be able to use that spot that he's already earned, he also has to appear in every single race or make an attempt to qualify or qualify, something in those terms. And so
okay, I didn't know this. I didn't know that you had to do all the races. This is really interesting because I thought, why wouldn't you miss the Coke 600 to do the Indy 500? I mean,
here you go. So then
you already qualified for the playoffs, but this is new information.
So yes, it's I think it's kind of all tied into the charter agreements, maybe in some way, along with the way they made the playoff format a decade ago or more. So that means NASCAR in the past, for drivers who have been injured, now whether that's a concussion, whether that's Chase Elliott's devastating leg injury last year, ultimately he didn't make the playoffs, so it didn't matter. Although he made the owners' playoffs, but again, that's a separate thing. So drivers who have had concussions, arm injuries, leg injuries, hand injuries, if they have missed races in the regular season, NASCAR has unilaterally given out waivers for those drivers to gain clearance into the playoffs so long as they qualify either on winning a race or on points. The only exception to that people have mentioned, and what makes this maybe a little bit more interesting, is that Chase Elliott also was granted a waiver last year. Again, he didn't use it because he didn't make the playoffs, but they granted him a waiver for the 1 race suspension that he also got for, I think, intentionally crashing. Is it Denny Hamlin last year, maybe? So NASCAR basically said, you did something non-injury wise that prevented you from being in a race. He didn't go as far as to choose not to run the race, which Rick and Kyle essentially did, but they still gave that to them. So that was why there was so much discourse coming into the 500 about Hendrick saying that the Coke 600 was still their priority. There were, I being one of them, I think there were a lot of folks that felt like they were saying one thing publicly and then saying other things privately in conversations to NASCAR. NASCAR, of course, doesn't want their premier team to be publicly devaluing one of their races. NASCAR, in every form of things, thinks they are bigger and better in IndyCar. In lots of ways, they are right, except for when it comes to the 500. And so Hendrick was doing all the right things coming into Sunday, saying, if push comes to shove, we're going to prioritize getting Kyle to the 600, until they had to make that decision. And then Sunday morning, it started to trickle out that Kyle and Rick were choosing to stay here, even on the 4-hour rain delay, and prioritize the 500 and do that. And there are a lot of folks that believe that's because they'd privately gotten assurances from NASCAR that this waiver would be granted. Now, how that applies to next year is that NASCAR is going through these new charter agreements, putting this package together. Whether this could factor into charter agreements or something else, you could just make a simple rule change and say, you could further clarify what you can give a waiver for and can't. You could publicly say, hey, Rick Hendrick and Kyle Larson will give this to you this one time, but we are already publicly denying your waiver for next year. And then in that case, I don't think Kyle does it. I think that Rick and Kyle have too much on the line. They do too much across a nearly 40 race season, unfortunately, to basically nullify all of that work so that he can go and do the Indy 500. As a shame as that would be, I would argue, devil's advocate against NASCAR, that you could add up all the time that Kyle was on TV and was being talked about during Indy 500 practice and qualifying and carb day and the parade, the victory celebration after the race, during the race. I mean, that is hours and hours and hours of what essentially amounted to free advertising for NASCAR.
It was the Kyle Larson 500 for quite a while. So
I know. So, I think the sensible thing from my point is, yes, this is a slippery slope that you don't want to get into. I understand that. But at the same time, I mean, come on, you have to, if you're NASCAR, you have to understand what the 500 is, how special the double is. They had every intention to come and do this, weather put them in a weird position. And I just think you can't look at this without just kind of having some understanding and being in someone else's shoes and seeing the bigger picture and not just focusing on your best interests. I know ultimately things like this, you come down and say, this is a business and we are NASCAR and we're not going to do anything that is going to help IndyCar without also helping us. So I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. We might learn some more about that in the coming weeks.
I think you're right. If that waiver doesn't get granted, or if there's anything around that could affect next year, then I got the sense that from just reading what Kyle has said, that it seems like the priorities moving forward will be Cup. So that's interesting.
I hope he's back. I hope he gets another shot at it. I think there's so much that you can learn, both just how to go about the month, how to go about qualifying, how to run in traffic in the race. I think there's a lot that can be learned. Yes, we do see some rookie winners of this race occasionally, but it's very rare. And I think it would be really cool to see Kyle in this race with IndyCar, Indy 500 experience, and not just doing everything for the first time. I mean, as again, we said, yes, they kind of sort of practice them on Monday and Friday in practice, but That was Kyle's first green flag pit stop in an IndyCar on a super speedway, coming off of turn 4 after going 230 miles an hour. And he goofed it. He's human. Scott Dixon screwed it up on his last pit stop of the race in 2022. So it's an easy thing to do. And I hope that's not where Kyle Larson's Indy 500 legacy stays. So.
Absolutely. 100% agree.
All right. Well, before we go, yes, this weekend we have another race, the Detroit Grand Prix, the second year on the course in the streets of downtown Detroit. Excited to get back for this race, see how things are different from year 1 to year 2. You always see little bits of tinkering with the way this corner is profiled here, or how the pit lane looks compared to last year when they had that two-sided situation. I'm sure that'll be back again. It's an interesting crowd last year, maybe not quite as big as some folks made it sound, but I'm interested to see how this year is hopefully different and better. And you just hope, as we were talking about and referencing earlier, that this great Indy 500 that we had can be a spark of momentum for this series. One thing that I've had in my head throughout this whole month is, like, as great and as exciting as this whole month is, it's just a shame that more of the calendar can't have a bigger fraction of the attention and the interest and the excitement that the 500 has. So.
Well, we know Flavor Flav will be in Detroit wearing his Will Power shirt, so that's one fan counted already. So yeah, it should be an exciting street course. I'm looking forward to seeing the improvements on the track. There's definitely a lot of areas that could have been improved last year, so hopefully they've addressed those, and it's an exciting race.
If we can get away from anyone other than Alex Palou winning on Sunday, I feel like we'll actually come away with a really interesting championship fight shaping up. If Alex goes and wins this race just as he did last year, after having finished in the top 5 in the 500 as he did last year, he was top 6 technically, but after having won the Grand Prix in his first race of the year as he did last year, I think we could start to have an interesting championship fight.
I think it's going to be really open, and I think at the same time we're in that, post 500 where the IndyCar silly season starts to really ratchet up a little bit. It seems like I'm already hearing whispers of certain potential moves. We got the charter system where everyone's waiting with bated breath to see how that develops and evolves, and whether it gets implemented or not. So there's a lot of great storylines that are shaping up for the rest of the summer and the rest of the season. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you hear, Nathan, on the ground for more than one reason.
Yep. That's definitely part of my focus, to get to Detroit and put the 500 behind us and start looking at the series and the season as a whole. And this is, I remember last year, kind of the first race of the year where you really start to dig into the silly season stuff, and hope to come away next week for next week's episode with a little bit more pieces of information.
Some juicy gossip.
Yes. Information, hopefully gossip, if nothing else, at least. All right, well, that's where we will leave things. Thanks again for everyone who's been listening, downloading, subscribing, commenting on this podcast. It's been a really fun couple months of ways to just kind of digest and recap every single race on the IndyCar calendar. We'll look forward to doing more of that here on this busy stretch that continues on the IndyCar calendar as we hit Detroit and then Road America the week after that. Tune in again early to mid next week for another edition of IndyCar Weekly. For Stefan Wilson, I'm Nathan Brown of the IndyStar. Thanks so much for listening.